Hello all. After the video I did earlier on the narrative the elites want us to believe around Jeffrey Epstein and how insane it all is, it got me thinking we're supposed to believe insane things all the time in liberal modernity. Case in point is Emmanuel Macron's visit to Britain at the behest of King Charles. Now, the three big takeaways from Macron's visit are as follows. Number one, Britain and France are supposed to be getting closer together in terms of political agreement. Now, I'm all for that in principle. I'm turning into something of a pan-Europeanist. However, I don't want a union with other European countries if it's in the service of globalist liberalism. But given we're ruled by the Starminator who prefers Davos to Westminster, and the French are ruled by Macron, who's basically the ultimate globalist liberal, now Merkel has disappeared, so it seems the trad-Europeans like me may have to put the dream on ice for a while, but just imagine a united Europe, how strong we'd be in our vitality, what we could achieve, how we could reinvigorate our culture. I'm not saying here we should let go of our own national cultures and identities. I'm saying that we have bigger fish to fry at the moment, and if we don't join forces and recognise that, I think it might be curtains for us all. Yet the elites of Europe seem hell-bent on closing that curtain. They're either evil or deluded, and that was proven by the two other major points that came out of Macron's visit. Number one, King Charles said there are no borders between England and France, and Macron also questioned the theory that might is right. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know I like to take things down to their foundations, and one of the core foundations of life is masculine and feminine energy. I believe the contemporary Western world is trapped in a sort of spiritually feminine energy. We don't really trust masculinity as a culture. We call it toxic, and we certainly don't trust the archetype of the wise king. Now, the archetypal energy of the masculine force is order. It's the counterweight to the feminine chaos. And sure, order can sometimes be too strict. That can be like a tyranny. But order implemented correctly creates a sort of line between the yin and yang, the good way of life, if you will. Now, when you remove that masculine principle, which in the West was represented by God the Father and the tradition that followed, what you're left with is increasing feminine energy, which comes in the language of emotionality and compassion, but ultimately leads to more chaos. Incidentally, this is why the left liberal types who are spiritually feminine hate Donald Trump so much on a visceral level. It's because Trump represents something masculine, which is order, borders, walls, these sorts of things that men classically would have implemented in years gone by. He may not have been the person we thought he was in 2016, but still he represents that to the liberals. This is why, if you're more right-leaning, you're more aligned with masculine energy, you'll see Trump's ideas as sort of good sense, as like a strong hand that we need to maintain stability in the Western world. But if you're more spiritually feminine, you'll see it as, toxic masculinity, evil, cruelty, and all the rest of it. And then the gynocratic media will just amplify that times 1,000. And the problem is with this more spiritually feminine approach to life is that it conceptualizes Christian concepts such as love purely through the feminine frame. That is, softness, meekness, compassion. And because the modern Western world is lost without the masculine principle, it means that our elites speak in this spiritually feminine language. It's why King Charles said there are no borders between Britain and France, which is just clearly untrue, but also completely impractical. And while King Charles says this in a suit standing on the decaying monument of British tradition which was once masculine, the energy behind it is no different from pop culture. It's no different from Harry Styles saying that, he has to break boundaries in music and fashion and socially with regards to sexuality, because he's going to wear a dress because he's blurring the lines, he's androgynous, he's so challenging. Of course, the irony is with all of this that neither King Charles nor Harry Styles are actually challenging to the power structure of the age. In fact, they're slavishly and obsequiously obedient to the liberal spiritual femininity of the age. And this leads me to the central point of the video, where Macron says we will never accept the theory that might is right, a spiritually feminine comment. He says this with Elizabeth's statue behind him, a member of the royal family. How do you think royal families were established? Do you think they just turned up one day and said, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'll have a crack? Of course, the royal families of Europe got their power through fighting. And even in this day and age where we think we're beyond that sort of behaviour, politics still functions under that model. Why do you think America is so dominant? Because it's got the most powerful military. Now, I'm not saying that this state of play is necessarily ethical. I'm saying it's just the harsh reality of life. And if you don't address it, you're living in a delusion. But a delusion is exactly what our liberal overlords want us to live in. They want us to think that there are no such thing as borders between us, except when it suits them. They want us to think that they care just as much as we do about the illegal immigrants coming over, when in reality that's not even the core issue. The core issue is legal immigration. If you actually cared about your country, you'd know that Europeans are being made a minority in Europe. I mean, even saying something like that to them would be met with looks of complete disgust and scorn. They'd say, "Don't you know that George and Tentiqua, who came over from Ghana last week, are just as European as you? You disgust me, now get in jail." Now, I'll leave it to you in the comments to decide whether these people are like this because they're just power hungry and will do whatever the power structure of the age demands, whether they're simply naive and caught up in the spiritual femininity of the age, or these people are just simply malevolent. Yet it does seem that their liberal delusion isn't really working anymore. They have to segue Macron in France in any way possible to try and keep Le Pen out. And over here in the UK, the Labour Party approval rating has now fallen to only 13%. So will they just maintain their liberal delusion and expect us to believe it, even though nobody really does, as things get worse and worse? If that's the case, they're going to have to wake up to a very harsh truth which is already emerging in Europe. If you create low-trust societies where people don't trust each other, where things don't work by themselves anymore, then what you need is a tyrant, because only strong political force can hold down a very disorganized, dispirited, and broken society. Bear in mind, we're already at the point where our courts are almost collapsing. A former Lord Justice has said we now need to have jury-free trials. I'm sure that's going to be a good idea. Why don't you automate them as well? I'm sure Tony Blair would be very fond of that. My point is that the UK is becoming increasingly lawless and out of control, and on top of that, our state institutions are increasingly bureaucratic and slow, that things are starting to fall apart. And then Macron, King Charles and Starmer want to tell us that we don't have borders, that everything's hunky-dory and we need to push on together to keep liberalism turning. Oh, and by the way, they'll throw you in jail if you send an edgy tweet. Yet as much as our elites wish us to hold on to these liberal narratives which just don't map onto reality any longer, it seems to me the only way through this is a sort of rebirth, culturally, personally, civilizationally. That's the only way to save Europe and the Western world in my eyes. But do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new.